Welcome back, nerdy movie fans, as we discuss the third installment in the World to Pandora Avatar Fire and Ash. Now, I know there's been a little bit of a divide between the reaction with this one. There are some people that are glad that this is potentially the final Avatar movie, and then there are others that are hoping there can be more made. And just my general consensus before we dive into it, based off of what I've seen in this movie, I would watch more. I mean, the storytelling was just absolutely spot on, and it brought about, I would say, new emotions that I don't think Way of Water brought about. So the first one obviously is a classic. I mean, everything the first one stood for and tried to do and accomplished just made everything about it so memorable. However, I feel like Avatar The Way of Water felt repetitive with a lot of the storytelling, and The Way of Water kind of had generally the same plot. So this one was brand new, and that's why I like this one. I would say Fire and Ash is a lot better than Way of Water. So let's talk about the collection. So I got both movies here in 4K. So I actually have the steelbooks. We have the first Avatar. So here is the steelbook for it, which is pretty nice. A pretty nice steelbook. I like it a lot. It's got the military on the back, and then we got the Navi on the front, which is pretty cool. And then it's kind of similar here. We don't get the military, but we get the new creatures on the front from this from Way of Water, of course. And then we got his family on the back, which is sort of the backbone of the storyline for this one. And so having these two steelbooks is pretty cool, and I do look forward to picking up a Fire and Ash steelbook, assuming they will make one when it's time for the third installment to reach physical media. And so, as I said, the first one, I absolutely loved everything about it. I rewatched the first one not long before Fire and Ash. It reignited my passion for this franchise because the first one was just that good. And so I just really love the world building. I think that's probably, in my opinion, the strongest aspect of the Avatar movies. From a technical standpoint, a lot of people have a deep appreciation for the technology and the visuals for these Avatar movies. And I agree, it looks really great. I'm just not educated enough to really notice and understand the differences between comparing the technologies of the first and the second and the first two other movies that came out in the same year or around the same time. And so I don't know what it is about it, but obviously I just fell in love with the world of Pandora from the first one. And so with the second, the only complaint I had, which I would say is my strongest complaint, is it could all be summed up to be explained the same way as the first one, where in the first movie, you have the military, the sky people, need this one resource that's vital for humanity, but just so happens that the Navi are living in the area with where that one resource they need most is. And so they go against Jake Sully, who happens to defend those people against the military, defending the sacred place. And so it's kind of the same thing in Avatar Way of Water. We have the same villain brought back, which at first, and I will come back to this, because at first I was disappointed with the fact that the same villain is recycled again. However, I really do think it works for the third one. So going back to Way of Water, we have the same villain going after the same good guy who is a part of the Sky People who need this one special resource that's being defended by the Navi, where Jake Sully is, and he's going to defend his people in the sacred space so that the Sky People can't get this special thing they need. And so, if you sum it up, which is a overgeneralization, but because it sounds exactly the same, that's why I thought Way of Water was a little disappointing. Visually, yes, it was absolutely phenomenal, and the acting was really, really good. We got introduced to new characters, new creatures, the whole water aspect was really cool in the second, but it felt like the world building aspect got condensed into world building alone, where it felt like not much was really progressing throughout the entire middle of the movie, which wasn't my first impression, but this is what I noticed on a rewatch, where we have a lot of action going on in the first 30 to 40 minutes of the movie, and then there's a long, dragged out, kind of the same thing happening over and over and over until about the last 30 minutes of the movie. And so I did like Avatar Way of Water, but there was a lot that I think could have been cut out or at least trimmed or condensed. So with Fire and Ash, it's a brand new approach. We yet again have the same villain. We still have Miles Quaritch as his, avatar self, like we saw in Way of Water, but he sort of has this new motive. Killing Jake Sully isn't for the good of humanity or for the people. It's personal for him now. So it's kind of like a revenge story versus in the second one, it was just him doing his duty just like the first one. So it's more personal in this one. Plus with Spider, he is Quaritch's son. So of course in the second one we learn all of this and his avatar self doesn't really feel that connection to Spider. But in the third one he's starting to wonder, maybe he does have a connection to him. Maybe he does wish him well. And so he's wrestling with that. He's his avatar self. He's wrestling with the humanity that he had before and didn't really explore before. Just being this hard veteran. In the second one, we're seeing his more emotional slash human side in Fire and Ash. And so to that narrative, there is so much emotional storytelling in this movie. I can't even begin to describe all the different moments where I was on the edge of my seat. I didn't know which character to trust or not trust. I didn't know which dark motives or missions were going to be completed because of how messed up they seemed. And while at the same time, there was, I feel like, more action in this third movie than any of the others. There was just so much going on constantly, but it doesn't feel overwhelming. The storyline feels like it's paced really well, where it's just one thing after another, but everything is tied together at the same time. So Avatar Fire and Ash picks up kind of where the second one left off, where they just lost, where Jake Sully and Neytiri, they just lost their firstborn son. And so Loak, he is the one who's wrestling with getting his brother killed, even though it wasn't really his fault. It was his idea to go back, which ended up getting him killed. And so Loak is the one narrating throughout this movie, which in A Way of Water, it was Jake Sully narrating. So that is completely different now. And I thought it was just really interesting having a different character do that, because I think the actor does an amazing job. The character is really well written, and he's obviously trying to become more responsible in this movie versus the last one. The last one, he was kind of loose cannon because he's got his older brother who's going to be the responsible one. Nothing's ever going to happen to his family, and then something does in The Way of Water, of course, and so now he has a sense of responsibility that he didn't have before. So between him and Kiri, who gets a lot of story, and Spider, who almost feels central to the plot, almost. Just all of the characters get story development. So as I try to brief their character development, because I feel like this video would be way too long if I describe the entire story progression between every single character. So Kiri is she's struggling with her connection to Eywa because she doesn't know what her background is, and she doesn't know how she's able to sort of control the elements the same way Eywa can. And so she is able to connect through her powers to save Spider, who is running out of oxygen in his mask, where he is now able to breathe on his own. So he is now the first person of the Sky People to breathe Na'vi air. And so that discovery amongst the Na'vi and the military, now the military, of course, want to study him, try to replicate that so humans can breathe the Na'vi air indefinitely. And so he becomes central to the plot in that aspect, where the Na'vi are trying to protect him and the military are trying to get to him. Of course, you also have Quaritch, who's trying to get to him for personal reasons, but also on behalf of the military. So you have that struggle. And so Kiri, after she reaches this development, she believes their deity Eywa is kind of abandoning her because she hasn't answered when Kiri has reached out. So she sees giving Spider this ability, I guess, as sort of, she sees it as taking care of things on her own without Eywa. And so that's where their storylines kind of progress. Where Loak, his storyline is becoming more responsible and a character you can really look up to. That's his progression. Took, she's just a little too young, I feel, to have some really good depth to her story. But having this little sister to protect serves everyone else's story of giving the sense of protection and, of course, responsibility as well, at the risk of sounding like a broken record. And so her character was written pretty well as well. And so we get to Neytiri. She wanted to trade a son for a son, threatening Spider in the last movie. So that is continued in this one, where she kind of believes maybe we should just kill him. Because she just doesn't trust Sky People, period. Because Sky People killed her son. And so Spider's not really her own, and she just thinks maybe he should just die. And especially when she finds out that he can breathe the Na'vi air, she believes now he should definitely be killed. And so that's something she's struggling with throughout this movie, where Jake Sully goes back and forth, where he spends a while trying to protect Spider, then eventually gets to the point where he decides, hey, this is way too dangerous for the sake of the Na'vi people and the planet of Pandora as a whole. Spider should die, but doesn't go through with it. So you have some really dark storylines where you have parents contemplating killing their children for the sake of the tribe and the planet. And so those are the themes you have with this movie. And those are sort of the storylines that are dark enough that bring out new emotions. Just seeing Jake Sully almost kill Spider is one of those edge of your seat kind of moments. And so by the time he decides not to go through with killing him, the movie is getting toward its final act at this point. So Quaritch has this sort of progression throughout the movie where he's contemplating what does he want to be for Spider? Does he want to be a good person? Does he want to force him into being like him? Does he want to let him make his own choice? Because on some level, he respects the way Spider was raised. He thinks he's a responsible person who can make really good decisions and defends his family like his own. And so, despite being raised by Jake Sully, Quaritch has this respect for Spider and Jake Sully to that fact as well. And so his struggle kind of takes a back seat when he meets Varong, which I believe is how you say it. She is the leader of the fire people, for lack of a more specific term, because some of the names are difficult to pronounce. They just are. And so Varong, her acting was really good in this movie. Her people served a really interesting purpose, having the constant action side being on basically her behalf. The only thing I wish we got more from her character is she starts to really describe what her people are really all about. Their settlement is near a volcano, and she mentions how fire destroyed their home, and they let fire be their god instead of Awa. And so they really, I mean, that sounds like I'm just summing it up, but that's kind of how it was handled in the movie as well. So I wish we could have gotten that story and their religion a little bit more in depth. I wish we learned more of that lore, but they serve as just the sort of animalistic Na'vi, because most of our people don't speak much. A majority of them are unnamed characters. I think pretty much all of them are unnamed. They're just always around. And so her purpose is Quaritch wants to use her to try and kill the Na'vi, so he's giving her weapons and her people weapons, but he's kind of falling for her. And so he's becoming, now he's got himself a woman, he's got a kid out there, he's Avatar right now, so he's part of the Na'vi, kind of. He rides Ikron, so he's just really struggling with trying to be himself, but be loyal to the military, but also to the Na'vi now, to the specific radical tribe. And so, while all of these struggles are happening throughout the majority of the movie, the final battle in the third act of the movie is just on such an epic scale, where you have all these characters throughout the movie and all these various tribes are all coming together for this one climactic conflict. And so it was just really cool to see the way the visuals were handled, the way the action sequences were shot, the writing for who's killed and who's not. I mean, there is a lot going on in this final act, and it was just so intense. There are a lot of edges of your seat moments. There are moments where you think there are characters that you really like are about to die, but then they don't. And then there are moments where you have a character that you see about to die, and then they really do. And so it's really tugging on those emotions throughout the entire time, where it's wondering, like, hey, this guy just got shot and he's dead. This guy got shot, but now he survives. And it's just like, sort of playing with your mind a little bit, wondering and giving you the sense of not everyone's making it out of this battle alive. And that is the case. There are casualties in this movie and in this fight specifically. But the way it ends is a pretty neat ending. It's not even, the final shot isn't even Jake Sully, who is the most central character in the first movie. But Loak is actually the one that gets the story in um, the final parts of the movie, and he narrates the opening. And so, him becoming central to this movie, even though his character took a backseat during the middle, so all these other characters can get their development as well. I just feel like it was extremely well balanced as far as everyone getting character development. Everyone by the end of this movie is at a different place than they were in the beginning, and everyone throughout the beginning and middle of this movie is at a different place than they were during Avatar Way of Water. And to me, that's just character progression. That is what happens when you don't write characters the exact same way over and over and over again. And so I think James Cameron has mastered that. And, he makes these comments that some people are upset with, but then you see his movie, it's like, well, damn, he could make a good movie, and it makes you wonder how far this franchise really can go, because Way of Water, a lot of people were excited, but there were plenty that thought the fatigue was real and it wouldn't make all that much money, and then it did. And so it's still opening weekend. I'm making this video now during opening weekend for Avatar Fire and Ash. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what the numbers are by the end of it. And I'm interested to see how much it can make during its theatrical run. Knowing James Cameron, this movie will probably be re-released a couple times just to boost the numbers, but I will be tuning into its numbers to see what they are in the end, because this was a really good movie, and if we don't get any more Avatars, I think this was an acceptable ending. I mean, this is a very acceptable ending for Avatar. But if we are going to go into an Avatar 4, whatever it may be called, there is enough room and characters and, I guess, kind of villains left around to have story for an Avatar 4, but they're not as important or cliffhanger enough to really bother me if this does end up being the last one. So I really enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think, and thank you for watching. Keep it digging.